Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk," begged the female CEO. Then, the single dad changed everything. The woman's voice trembled through the damp, narrow alley, sharp with desperation and fear. Rainwater glistened on the cracked pavement, pooling beneath her trembling body. A car's headlights flared behind the figure approaching her, casting his long shadow across the walls like a looming monster. The man's pace was slow, deliberate, his fists clenched, his breath heavy. She curled up tighter, her white suit smeared with dirt and tears, blonde hair clinging to her face. Her left ankle was badly swollen, twisted at an unnatural angle. She winced, trying to move, but the pain sent fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. At that moment, around the corner at the end of the alley, a man appeared, tall, rugged, carrying a little girl wrapped in a faded yellow raincoat. His clothes were worn, his boots wet, his expression tired. But when he heard the voice, so raw, so broken, he stopped. The little girl stirred in his arms. "Daddy, is she gonna die?" she whispered. The man set her gently on the ground. "Stay here," he said softly but firmly. She nodded, clutching a small stuffed rabbit to her chest. Without hesitation, he stepped forward into the alley. His voice rang out, low and commanding. "Step away from her, now." The man looming over the woman turned, startled. For a moment, tension rippled in the rain-soaked air. But the stranger's eyes, sharp, steady, unflinching, were locked on him. There was something in that gaze that stopped the aggressor cold. Not fear, not rage, just quiet certainty. The would-be attacker took a step back, then another. And without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The blonde woman blinked in disbelief, her breath catching as the man approached. Her limbs trembled, not just from pain, but from shock. The little girl peeked from the alley's entrance, her eyes wide. Lightning flashed. Thunder rolled. The man knelt beside the woman, his voice soft now. "You're safe. I've got you." She stared at him, lips parted, unable to speak. She did not yet know his name. But in that moment, something changed. And though she could not stand, though she was broken and bruised, she had just been seen, and her life was about to change forever. Tyler Ford lived on the third floor of a crumbling apartment building where the walls whispered with the echoes of lives long exhausted. At 31, his life had already been split in two, before and after he lost his wife. 2 years ago, cancer took her quickly, cruelly. Since then, everything had revolved around Lily. He worked as a washing machine repairman, taking jobs that paid just enough to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. Most days, he smelled like rusted pipes and detergent, but he never minded. As long as Lily had crayons, warm meals, and a safe place to sleep, he could live with the aching joints and late rent notices. Once, Tyler had worn a different uniform. He was a rescue worker, a firefighter-paramedic with nerves of steel and a heart trained to run toward danger. There was a long scar on his left arm, a souvenir from a burning house where he'd pulled a small girl out of the flames. He never talked about it. Some memories weren't meant to be honored. They were meant to be carried quietly. Now, he carried his daughter, Lily, 6 years old, with wild curls and a giggle that could shake the sadness out of a room. She never went anywhere without her battered box of crayons. "Colors make things better," she liked to say. She filled their home with drawings, flowers, rainbows, stick figures holding hands. Her world was tiny, but bright. That rainy night, Tyler had promised her a treat. A hot dog from the corner stand if she behaved through the grocery run. They had just turned down a back alley to cut across the block when they heard it. A scream. A woman's voice, trembling, pleading. That night, Isabel Monroe had not intended to run. But when her fiancé, David Langston, the CFO of her company, locked the hotel suite door behind him and began raising his voice, something inside her snapped. For months, he had been pressuring her to sign over control of critical assets in their joint holdings. The marriage was part of a business strategy, her father's strategy, to secure dominance in the tech world. But Isabel was not built for cages. She said no, and when his hand gripped her wrist, she grabbed the laptop with the incriminating files and fled barefoot into the rain. She had never run like that before, not through alleys, not with her heart pounding like a hunted animal's. She slipped. Her ankle gave way. She fell hard onto the cold, wet concrete. Still, she held the laptop against her chest, as if it were her only lifeline. Because it was. Now, her breath came in gasps. The pain in her leg blurred her vision. Her white designer suit was ruined, torn at the shoulder, soaked to the bone. Her phone had been lost somewhere on the street. The man she once trusted was getting closer. She could hear his footsteps. And that was when she saw him. Tyler carried her in silence. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time they reached his building. Isabel's body trembled from cold and shock. She clung tightly to the laptop against her chest, her grip unrelenting even as pain radiated from her ankle. Tyler said nothing, only adjusted her in his arms to shield her better from the wind. "It's okay," he said, gently lowering her onto the couch. "You're safe here." Lily entered a moment later, tiptoeing through the doorway in her rain boots. She held her bunny in one arm and looked at Isabel curiously. Her gaze wasn't fearful, just serious, the kind of serious only a child can be. Then she tilted her head and asked, "Daddy, why is she crying like me when I miss Mommy?" Tyler froze. Isabel's breath hitched. She turned her face away, as if the words had pierced something she didn't know existed. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the couch. She wanted to speak, but couldn't. "She's had a hard day, honey," Tyler said softly. "Sometimes grown-ups cry, too." Lily nodded solemnly, then wandered off toward her room, her little boots squeaking with each step. Tyler brought a clean towel and wrapped it gently around Isabel's shoulders. "I'll get you something warm. Tea, okay?" She nodded mutely. He disappeared into the kitchen. Isabel leaned back into the cushions, still damp, still cold. Her ankle throbbed. Her heart ached worse. She had been in penthouses, luxury spas, corporate boardrooms lined with mahogany. None of those places had felt like this, small, imperfect, but full of something she couldn't name. It scared her. In the middle of the night, Isabel awoke with a start. The room was dark, except for a soft glow from the hallway. Her ankle pulsed, but the pain was manageable now. Quiet filled the apartment. No sirens, no footsteps behind her, no one shouting. She sat up, unsure of how long she'd slept. The blanket that had covered her had slipped to the floor. Her laptop, still clutched in sleep, rested by her side. Guilt pressed on her chest. She had barged into a stranger's life, disrupted everything. She had no right. Slowly, she rose, biting back a hiss as her foot touched the ground. She limped toward the door, hoping to leave before dawn. No notes, no thanks, just disappear. But as she reached for her shoes by the door, she stopped. They weren't wet anymore. They had been carefully dried and patched. The loose sole had been stitched up with clean, deliberate lines. Next to them was a folded towel, fresh and warm. On top of it, a small piece of paper. The handwriting was rough, but steady. "Your foot's not better yet. You can stay. It's okay." Isabel stared at it for a long moment. No conditions, no expectations, no price. Just kindness. She sank slowly to the floor, the paper trembling in her hand. All her life, she had fought to prove herself, to be good enough, sharp enough, strong enough. But here, in a tiny apartment with a broken floorboard near the sink and crayon drawings on every wall, she felt something she never had in her glass-towered world. Accepted, for nothing more than simply being. The first morning after, Isabel woke to the faint whistle of a kettle and the soft clatter of pans from the small kitchen. For a moment she thought she was still in her penthouse, with staff preparing breakfast according to schedule. But then she saw the modest couch beneath her, the worn curtains fluttering from a draft, and the drawings taped across the refrigerator. She was not in her world anymore. Tyler appeared carrying a steaming mug. He placed it on the small table beside her. The sharp scent of ginger filled the air. "Drink this," he said, his voice calm. "It'll help with the pain." She sat up slowly, testing her injured ankle. It still throbbed, but the swelling seemed less than the night before. She sipped the tea. It was spicy, strong, oddly comforting. "You made this yourself?" she asked, almost surprised. "Old habit," he replied, sitting down on the edge of the coffee table with a roll of bandages. "Ginger tea, clean water, steady hands. That's all it takes sometimes." Without another word, he gently lifted her foot onto his lap. His touch was steady but careful, never lingering, never invasive. He removed the old bandage, cleaned the wound, and began to rewrap it. Isabel watched in silence. She had been surrounded by assistants and advisors for years, but none of them had ever cared for her like this. Not with patience, not with attention, not without expectation. "You've done this before," she murmured. He nodded once. "Rescue work, fires, accidents. You learn to keep calm, even when you're falling apart inside." Her eyes softened. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, he reached for her jacket, torn from the struggle in the alley. He pulled a small sewing kit from the shelf and began threading a needle. "You don't have to," she started. "I know," he interrupted gently, "but it's worth fixing." The thread was a little uneven, the stitches imperfect. Still, he worked with such focus that something in Isabel's chest broke open. The tears came suddenly, unstoppable. She covered her face with her hands, ashamed. Tyler paused. "Did I hurt you?" She shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, I'm not used to this, being cared for." He didn't push her to explain. He simply handed her a tissue and said, "Everyone deserves it, even you." That was when small footsteps pattered across the floor. Lily appeared, her hair in wild curls, her pajamas covered with stars. She held a piece of paper tightly against her chest. Without hesitation, she walked over and placed it in Isabel's lap. "This is for you," Lily said proudly. Isabel unfolded the paper. It was a crayon drawing, bright colors filling the page. A tall man with brown hair, a little girl in yellow shoes, and beside them an empty outline of a woman with golden hair. Confused, Isabel looked up. "Who is this?" Lily smiled, pointing at the figure. "That's you. I left the space empty for a long time, waiting for someone who belongs. I think it's supposed to be you now." Isabel's throat tightened. Her hands shook as she held the picture. "Sweetheart," she whispered, struggling to find words. "Why me?" "Because you're here," Lily answered simply. "And you look like someone who needs a family." Isabel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She pressed the picture to her chest as tears spilled freely. For so long, her life had been a battlefield of boardrooms, contracts, and expectations. She had been defined by numbers, power, and appearances. No one had ever left a space for her, only demands for what she must become. Yet here, in this cramped apartment, with peeling paint and the sound of a child's crayons scratching across paper, she was being offered something she had never known, a place. She looked at Tyler, who stood silently in the doorway, watching the exchange. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes told her everything: acceptance, patience, and a quiet hope he dared not speak. Isabel turned back to Lily, managing a smile through her tears. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the kindest gift I've ever been given." Lily giggled and picked up her crayon box. "Then I'll make it official. Purple dress, right?" Isabel nodded, laughing softly through her tears. "Yes, make it purple." And as Lily filled in the empty outline with bold strokes of color, Isabel felt something loosen inside her, something soft, something alive. For the first time in years, she felt what it meant to belong. Isabel's ankle was healing slowly. Each morning brought a little more strength, a little less pain, but walking was still difficult. She hated the feeling of weakness, of needing help, but Tyler never made her feel small for it. He offered his arm without a word, let her lean on him as they moved through the apartment. When she stumbled, he steadied her. When she winced, he paused. There was no pity in his actions, just presence and patience. Just one step at a time, he'd say gently, his voice low and calm. Isabel would nod, focusing on the rhythm of their movement. Step, breathe, balance. It became their quiet ritual, a rhythm of trust that neither of them named out loud. One sunny Saturday morning, Lily announced it was time to make pancakes. "Daddy makes them okay," she said with an exaggerated shrug, "but I bet Isabel makes them fancy." "I wouldn't count on it," Isabel warned with a smirk. "I've never actually cooked anything myself." Lily's eyes widened. "Never?" "Nope, not even toast." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "That's about to change." They gathered in the small kitchen, elbows bumping as they mixed batter in a cracked ceramic bowl. Lily stood on a chair to reach the counter, her curls bouncing with excitement as she gave orders like a seasoned chef. "More milk, not too many eggs, and wait for the bubbles before flipping." Isabel tried to follow the directions, but the first pancake stuck. The second one folded in on itself. The third one somehow caught fire. Tyler snatched the pan off the burner, waving a dish towel at the thin trail of smoke. "I think that one's yours," he joked, nudging the blackened blob toward Isabel's plate. They all laughed. Real laughter that came from the belly, loud and unguarded. It filled the kitchen like sunlight. When they finally sat down to eat, the pancakes were uneven, a little burnt, some even raw in the middle. But Lily grinned as she took a big bite. "These are dorky pancakes," she declared, "but dorky is good." They ate slowly, letting the golden light pour over the table. Outside the window, the city bustled on, but inside, time seemed to soften. Lily chattered about school, how she'd almost won the spelling bee, how her teacher wore socks with cats on them, how she'd told the class that Isabel was her maybe new mom. Isabel froze for half a second, eyes meeting Tyler's across the table. He didn't react, just reached over and poured more syrup onto Lily's plate like it was the most natural thing in the world. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep surrounded by coloring books and plush animals, Isabel and Tyler sat on the couch, watching the soft flicker of headlights from the street below. The television was off. The quiet between them was full, not empty. Isabel pulled the blanket closer, her body still tired from practicing steps earlier. Without thinking, she leaned sideways and rested her head on Tyler's shoulder. He didn't move. She could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, the warmth of his presence grounding her. "You don't know," she whispered, "but you've saved me from so many things." Her voice was barely more than breath, but he heard her. He didn't turn, didn't ask what she meant. He simply said, "I didn't save anyone. I just saw someone who needed help." She closed her eyes. That answer, quiet, honest, unheroic, cut through all the noise she'd lived with for years. No one had ever looked at her and seen a person before. They'd seen opportunity, strategy, success. But Tyler, he saw someone who was hurting, and instead of walking away, he stayed. And that, she realized, was what love might actually be. Not grand gestures, but the willingness to stand still with someone until they could walk again. It began with a phone ringing in the hallway, then the buzzing at the front door, then the knock, loud, firm, too familiar. Isabel froze, her hands still soapy from washing dishes. Tyler glanced out the window, then quickly closed the curtain. "Don't move," he said calmly. She didn't need to ask. The moment she saw the sleek black car parked on the street, she knew. They had found her. Within hours, more arrived. A cameraman, a woman in a tight blazer with a microphone, A man from legal wearing a tie that screamed damage control. The sidewalk outside the apartment became a low-key spectacle. Tyler stood by the door, arms folded across his chest, body blocking the peephole. From the bedroom, Lily's voice called out softly, "Why are people outside?" "It's okay, honey," Isabel said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're just lost." Later that evening, as the reporters grew tired and the knocks faded into silence, Isabel received a message from the board. An offer. A generous one. Millions of dollars in new compensation, full reinstatement, rebranding, reputation management. All she had to do was come back, sign the papers, smile for the cameras, and pretend none of it had happened. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen where Tyler stood drying a dish with an old checkered towel. "I'm not going back," she said. He didn't look up right away. "You sure?" "Yes," she said. "I've been offered more money than I could ever spend, but not once in all those years, did I wake up feeling like I do here." He turned to her, eyes serious. "How do you feel here?" She hesitated, then answered, "Real. Seen. Safe." He nodded once. That was all he needed. By morning, they had packed a bag. Tyler loaded Lily into the truck and drove them out of the city, down winding roads lined with trees that had just begun to turn gold with the coming fall. They arrived at a quiet farmhouse tucked behind a grove of birch trees. It belonged to Tyler's mother, a retired nurse with soft gray hair and hands that knew how to make anyone feel like a child again. She took one look at Isabel, didn't ask questions, and said, "There's warm bread in the oven and a clean bed upstairs." That night, under a sky full of stars and silence, Isabel and Tyler sat on the porch steps, a worn quilt draped over their knees. "I used to think I had everything," she said. "Titles, property, power." He said nothing, just waited. "And yet," she continued, "it was all hollow. I didn't realize how much I had given up just to be seen as successful." Tyler took a slow sip of tea, then spoke. "They only saw your name, not you." She nodded. "Exactly." He looked out across the field, voice quiet. "I know what that's like. To be seen as something you're not." She turned to him. "Tell me." He took a long breath. "There was a fire. Years ago. Small house. I was the first on the scene. Pulled a little girl out." She could hear the tightness in his voice now. "She didn't make it. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough." She reached for his hand. "You still carry it, don't you?" He nodded. "Every day." There was no need to say more. The silence between them was not heavy. It was shared. Honored. She didn't fill it with apologies. He didn't fill it with bravado. They simply sat there, their fingers intertwined under the night sky, two people who had each lost something and now, quietly, had begun to find something else. They didn't speak of love or promises. But when Tyler glanced at her, and she met his eyes without flinching, they both understood. They were waiting for each other, and neither of them was waiting alone anymore. The boardroom was colder than she remembered. Not in temperature, but in energy. Polished glass walls, marble floors, and metal fixtures reflected every sterile inch of the space where Isabel Monroe had once commanded attention with just a glance. Now, she limped. Her steps echoed in uneven rhythm, one heel slightly dragging from the healing ankle. She wore no designer gown, no diamond accessories. Just a clean navy suit and determination burning in her eyes like fire refusing to be extinguished. Every head turned. The whispers started immediately. She came back. She actually showed up. What is she thinking? But no one stopped her. David Langston stood at the front of the room, smug, relaxed in the seat that once belonged to her. He smirked, leaning into the microphone. "Miss Monroe," he said, oozing false politeness. "How unexpected. I assumed you'd finally accepted your place off the board." Isabel didn't flinch. She walked straight to the center of the room, steadying herself with one hand on the table as she faced the crowd of shareholders, executives, and former allies. Her voice was clear, unshaken. "I came back to finish this the right way." David opened his mouth to respond, but she raised her hand. Calm, quiet, authority. The kind she used to wield like a blade. "I may not walk the same way I used to," she said, glancing briefly at her ankle, "but I stand taller now, because I stand for myself." The room hushed. With one tap on her laptop, the large screens behind her lit up. Spreadsheets, emails, confidential memos. All of it streamed into the room, proof of the fraudulent dealings, manipulated contracts, and the internal corruption orchestrated by David and several other board members. Gasps broke the silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Isabel turned slowly, making eye contact with every person in the room. "You thought I disappeared because I was weak," she said, "but I left because I needed space to remember who I was before you all convinced me I had to be someone else." David stood abruptly, trying to regain control. "This is reckless. Do you have any idea what this could cost you?" She looked at him, really looked, and saw for the first time how small he truly was. "I do," she said, "and I'm ready to pay it." She pulled out a document from her folder and placed it on the table with deliberate precision. "This is my formal resignation, effective immediately. I'm relinquishing my position, my shares, and every last piece of control you ever thought you had over me." The silence that followed was thunderous. "You can keep your board seats, your stock options, your empire built on fear and silence," she added, "but I will no longer be part of it." One of the shareholders, an older woman who had mentored Isabel in her early years, leaned forward. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Why?" Isabel's voice softened, but gained even more strength. "Because I am not a product. I am not a brand. I am not a bargaining chip in someone else's game. I am a person." The older woman nodded slowly, blinking back emotion. David, still standing, tried once more. "You'll regret this. You're throwing away everything." Isabel gave him one last look. "No," she said. "I'm walking away from something that never truly belonged to me in the first place." She gathered her laptop and folder with quiet grace. As she walked out, step by limping step, no one dared stop her. Not this time. And when the elevator doors closed behind her, she didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She exhaled. Outside, the sun had begun to set. The sky glowed with amber and rose, the city below humming with life. Isabel stepped onto the sidewalk not as a CEO, but as a woman who had finally chosen herself. And for the first time in years, her shoulders weren't carrying an empire, only her truth. And that was more than enough. When Isabel returned to the apartment, it was just as she remembered, modest, warm, and alive with quiet joy. The late afternoon sun spilled through the kitchen window, casting golden rays across the floor. On the small balcony, Tyler was crouched beside a planter, helping Lily dig out a wilted marigold, their hands dirty with soil and determination. Isabel stood silently in the doorway, watching them, heart full. She stepped out slowly, her voice tender. "Do you have room for one more in this garden?" Tyler looked up, his face lit up, not with surprise, but with the calm certainty of someone who had been waiting. He nodded once. "Always." Lily ran to Isabel, dirt smudged on her cheek and a proud grin stretched wide. "We're planting new flowers today. This one's gonna be orange. You can pick the next one." Isabel knelt and dug her hands into the earth with them. There, in the quiet act of planting something new, she felt her roots take hold. Days passed, and Isabel poured her energy into something she'd only dreamed of, the Lily House, a non-profit organization for women who had been manipulated, abused, or discarded by power structures, like the one she escaped. Tyler helped build the website. Lily insisted on the name. "Because flowers grow better when they have sunshine," Lily explained, and love. At the center of the Lily House's mission was this idea. No one should have to earn safety or beg for kindness. The world had failed so many women. Isabel was going to help rewrite that story. One evening, after dinner and a messy round of pancake flipping practice, the three of them curled up on the couch. Lily nestled into Isabel's side, crayons and drawings scattered on the coffee table. The hum of the city drifted in through the open window. Lily turned to Isabel, serious as ever. "Will you stay here forever?" Isabel looked into her big, hopeful eyes. "I drew you into our family already," Lily added, lifting a picture from her pile. 3 stick figures stood in front of a flower garden. 1 tall man, 1 little girl, and 1 blonde-haired woman in a bright dress. "I don't want to erase you later." Isabel's throat tightened. She pulled Lily close and whispered, "If you ever need me, sweetheart, I'll always be here." Later that night, Tyler found her on the balcony, gazing out over the city. "I have something for you," he said, stepping beside her. From his pocket, he pulled a small bracelet, woven from multicolored threads, uneven but clearly handmade. Isabel took it gently. "Lily made it. She called it a commitment bracelet." He smiled. "She said it's not a wedding ring, but she was wondering if maybe you'd want to be an unofficial mom first." Isabel's laugh turned into a tear. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly. "For the first time in my life," she whispered, "I feel like I've been chosen just for being me." Tyler took her hand, intertwining their fingers. They didn't need grand declarations. Everything that mattered was already planted. In the garden, in Lily's laughter, in the tiny threads of a bracelet made with hope. In the months that followed, Isabel's days were filled with healing, hers and others. The Lily House bloomed with stories of resilience, women finding their footing again, children smiling for the first time in months. Isabel spoke softly at community events, worked late with volunteers, and always returned to the apartment, or what had become home. One morning, Lily ran in from the balcony holding a fresh drawing. "Look," she beamed. "It's us planting flowers. It's our forever garden." Isabel knelt beside her and kissed her cheek. "Yes, sweetheart, it's exactly that." In the gentle hum of everyday life, in shared breakfasts, dirty hands in the garden, and quiet nights of reading bedtime stories, Isabel found a peace no corporate title had ever given her. She wasn't just safe. She was seen. She was loved. And this time, it wasn't because she had power. It was because she had chosen to stay and had been chosen in return. Sometimes, family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build, one act of kindness at a time. Isabel didn't just walk away from power. She walked toward something real. A little girl who believed in her, a man who never asked her to be perfect, and a life where love didn't come with conditions, only choices. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who might need a little light today. And if you believe in the power of love, healing, and second chances, subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales, because every week we bring you stories that remind us kindness is the richest love story of all.